So welcome to Midweek Experiments in Faithfulness. This is a weekly facilitated spiritual practice with a Quaker flavor and an experimental ethos. My name is Jen, and I'm the program manager here at Beacon Hill Friends House. The Friends House is a Quaker center for learning and action and a residential community of about 20 people who live according to Quaker values. And tonight we have Busshō Lahn with 2 Zen practices to ground you. So as we continue to live amid a pandemic a year later, many of us are feeling restless, tired, stressed, overwhelmed, and are suffering amid grief, loss, and so much more. All the while, many are also searching for practices to ground their life in meaning and connect with themselves and others. The practice and teaching found in Zen Buddhism can provide a gateway to cultivating self-awareness and spiritual growth, while learning how to acknowledge and move through suffering. Zen is life-affirming, earth-affirming, suffer-affirming, and relates to everything with compassion and wisdom. Everything without exception. So in this hour of Midweek, Busshō will offer us an overview and introduction to how meditation, zazen, and chanting are practiced in the Zen Buddhist tradition with short experientials of both. So now I'm excited to introduce you to Busshō. Busshō is a Zen priest, teacher, speaker, retreat leader, spiritual director, and an interfaith fellow at Augsburg University in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He serves the Flying Cloud Zen contemplative spiritual practice community, as well as the Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, Aslan Institute, and the Episcopal House of Prayer. His teaching focuses on contemplative spirituality, 12-step work, interfaith dialogue, mystical Christianity, and marrying spirituality with both Western and Buddhist psychology. You can learn more about Busshō's work at flyingcloudzen.org. And again, welcome. We're happy that you've joined us, and Busshō, it is all yours.
Let there be someone. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate your kind introduction. And it's wonderful to see all of these wonderful faces. Some of you are familiar to me. I've run across you at a midweek led by our friend Rachel a few weeks ago. Some of you are Jen and Rachel, who I know. It's great to be here in our virtual space together. As Jen said, I'm coming to you from the suburbs of the Twin Cities in Minnesota here, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And as a Zen practitioner, all of my friends in the kind of contemplative world, in both Christian contemplative practice, secular contemplative practice, and especially in the Buddhist contemplative world, kind of all either publicly or privately refer to the Quakers as our wonderful, beloved kind of cousins, or in-laws, or some sort of relative. We have some sort of extended family feeling about our dear friends in the Friends community. So it is especially meaningful to me to be welcomed into your space this evening, as I've always felt such a close kinship to what our 2 faith traditions hold in common, which is a great, great deal. A great, great deal. So I will jump right in to our material this evening because I know time is limited. And the 2 things that I'm offering experientials of this evening are, as Jen said, zazen, which is Zen meditation, and then the Zen understanding and expression of chanting as it is done in our tradition. And I'm going to spend a lot more time with this second one and a lot less time with the first one, not because of the relative value that's placed on those 2 things in my tradition, because they're seen as essentially equivalents, so the same sort of thing, but because the most of you are familiar with silent meditation, centering prayer, mindfulness, contemplative practice. You've got a good feel for kind of how that already shows up in your experience. I want to err to the side of giving you a taste of what you probably have less familiarity with. That seems like a more skillful use of our time this evening. So what I'm going to offer to start us off with is a short period of sitting meditation. Of course, a lot of you know and have a relationship with what that is in your life. What I want to highlight then this evening, because I'm coming to you from the Zen world, is sort of the uniqueness, the unique sort of flavor kind of that zazen can offer us. So I think of meditation, contemplation, centering prayer, I think of all of those things as kind of crayons in one of those big, awesome, if you were lucky enough to have one when you were a kid, boxes of Crayola, you know, the big 84 or 160 or whatever it was, all different sort of flavors. All those colors are beautiful. All of those expressions of self-reflection and introspection are beautiful. They are different tools offered to different people at different times. I think they're all really, really wonderful. That said, Zen Buddhism, the specific expression of the Buddhist tradition that we now call Zen, has its own unique relationship with one of those crayons, with one type of contemplative practice that we've basically stuck with for 1500 odd years. So what I'm doing is I'm highlighting the difference because this is what I'm used to doing. What I'm not doing, please understand, is doing any kind of comparison or holding up one thing to be in judgment of another. I'm just wanting to highlight kind of the contrast and difference so you get just a little sort of a teaser flavor of like, what are the Zen folks doing? So does that make sense? Kind of polite nodding faces. Okay. So let us do what I'm assuming most of us are at least a little bit familiar with doing, and that is take care of our posture. Let's start by noticing, hey, I'm going to be sitting for the next about 10 minutes. This will be a very short sitting to start with. We're just going to do 10 minutes tonight. But so please take care of your posture and your body the way you would normally at the beginning of one of your sessions of centering prayer or meditation, which is to say, please sit with intention. Just make a decision. How do you wish to balance your bones? How do you wish to align your spine? How would you like to be for the next about 10 minutes? The Zen Buddhist tradition of zazen is always done in silence, entirely. And tonight we will not do that because it is my job to give you some kind of fine points of difference and highlight some of those things. So I will be doing that as we sit together. But let us start, please, in the traditional way, which is with 3 bells. We will bring our attention inward. We will turn our light, as we say, turn the light inward. And let's start by just a couple of minutes of just focus on body and breath, right? We can call this mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath. We'll just start with a couple of minutes of that. And then I'll drop a few little pebbles into our pond during our sitting together. So I invite you to notice your conscious connection to your body and to your breath. That awareness that you have chosen for the past few minutes. Just sort of notice the size of the field of that awareness as you make the decision to put in the forefront, in the front of your conscious awareness, the sensations of body and the sensations of breath. Kind of notice how big that feels. And now I invite you to kind of make a very subtle shift, just a little. And I encourage you to crack your eyes open just a little bit, let in some light. I encourage you to cast your eyes downward. You may have been doing that already. Cast them downward at a gentle angle, maybe 45 degrees or so. The eyes are allowed open just enough so we have a sense of place. Light is allowed inward, but our gaze is soft. We're not looking at anything in particular. We're looking at everything in general. You may notice the effect that has on your experience. It may be quite different than what some of you are used to. And to go a small step further, I invite you to gently relinquish the body and the breath as the center of your awareness, and to let your awareness fall open to include everything equally. Including everything, excluding nothing, pushing away nothing, allowing everything in the one big open field of awareness. I invite you to take just a moment to notice the size of this container, the size of this pasture for your awareness. Just notice if you feel any difference. And for our final movement, this evening, I'm going to drop into this big pasture an expression, a Zen expression, a Zen understanding of the scale and profundity of the activity we are engaged in right now that we call zazen. And I encourage you to just listen to the words. Understanding them is not important, but noticing how you might feel in response to them can be our focus. And then I'll just end with a bell. When even just one person at one time sits in zazen, they become imperceptibly one with each and all of the myriad things, and they permeate completely all of time, so that within the limitless universes, throughout past, future, and present, they are performing the eternal and ceaseless work of guiding beings to enlightenment. You should know that even if all the Buddhas in the 10 directions, as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River, together engage the full power of their Buddha wisdom, they could never reach the limit or measure or comprehend the virtue of even one person's zazen. So perhaps take note, which is to say, kind of bring into your conscious awareness anything that you may have noticed in your feeling, in the landscape of your feelings arising in response to that verse. And we can kind of move gently into another space together. What we've done, although highly truncated to accommodate our limited time tonight, is what I've tried to do there is give you a little taste of what I have come to understand are kind of the three movements that I see in many meditation traditions. And the first, again, this is a broad brush for the sake of this evening's container, but the first is just the simple human ability to focus, to choose where our attention is going to go, and to notice what happens to us when we do that. These days, it's common to call that mindfulness. We sort of think of that as a secular, a human affair, right? I can focus what to choose to bring into the center of my awareness, and I can choose when I wander to bring it back, right? Mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath, mindfulness of emotion, right? This is the core of the mindfulness movement. It has its origins in the Buddhist tradition 2,500 years ago. Mindfulness of body and breath is taken right out of traditional Buddhist teachings from about 500 BC. And we all know there's a power in doing that. There's all sorts of things that open up to us when we become more self-aware and then make conscious decisions about where we want our awareness to be and the kind of awareness that we sustain, right? I think we all can feel the power of especially a non-judgmental, kind witness, right? Most of us notice a huge difference in the quality of our experience when we practice this kind of thing, right? As well as greater, I would say, agency about what we notice, and therefore the freedom of choice that comes with that. And then that second movement, I kind of said, hey, crack your eyes open a little bit. Allow your gaze to be big and soft, and let go of your focus on one thing, and let it be undifferentiated. That, strictly speaking, now we're doing zazen. Shikantaza is the Japanese word that means just to sit. Meaning, I'm not doing anything other than sitting with every cell of my body, with every bit of my awareness. I'm not picking and choosing. I'm not choosing to go and leave. There's no judgment. I'm just resting in the field of awareness itself, and I'm not making any decisions. I'm just resting in awareness. So emotions arise and change. I hear what I hear. I see what I see. That's part of the reason we leave our eyes open in Zen. We have for 1,500 years. Eyes are open. Why? Because we're not saying no to anything. We let in everything, right? And the Zen understanding of enlightenment, the Zen understanding of love, of heaven, of nirvana is it's right here, right now, never later. So the idea of staying here now in this body, staring at this carpet that in my house needs cleaning, that's it, right? So the eyes open is sort of a symbolic way of saying, yes, yes to this too. I hear what I hear. I feel what I feel. I see what I see. It all gets included in, right? So that vast open pasture is one of the hallmarks of Zen Buddhism. And shikantaza, an unnecessarily complicated word, is something that is written about and talked about extensively in our tradition. And then finally, I invited us into that third kind of space, which is that poem, that verse, traditional Zen verse. It's pretty unique to Zen, I would argue. Other schools of Buddhism would have different relationships probably expressed around what meditation practice is for. But when I read those words, although it's a poem and it's using really lofty, you could feel really lofty spiritual language, the teaching that was offered there is understood to be literal. It is not understood to be a poetic exaggeration for the sake of, evoking emotion. That is seen to be literal. And so the teaching there feels to me like a good kind of segue into the world of chant. Because the teaching of when even one person for a few minutes sits still and does zazen, that's it. That is the activity of all of the Buddhas. That is the activity of enlightenment. That is the entirety of the Buddhist past. That is it. That is absolutely it. It lacks nothing. That in me creates an emotion. Some of us have an emotional response to that kind of stuff. Some of us don't. There's not a thou shalt here. There's no way of failing this. But I wanted us to see the movement from paying attention to objectless paying attention, no differentiation made, right? To understanding what we just did as being, this is the entirety of everything. And in an ideal world, we all would be together for probably a week or something, right? In that beautiful house in Boston, and we'd all be together for a week. We have plenty of time to be silent together, and we'd spend a couple days with this, and then a couple days with this, and then a couple days, right? But I wanted to give you just a little tiny taste of this is one of the uniquenesses of what Zen understands meditation to be. It has all of those movements, but it is understood to be, this is the enactment of enlightenment itself. Even if it's your very first time doing it, that's it. And I think that is I just think it's a fascinating assertion. So it's not quite fair to say Buddhism has tenets of faith. It's not quite right. But if we were to have tenets of faith in Zen, that last piece that I read you, that would be our tenet of faith, right? And I love the universality of that. I think it's quite beautiful. So I'm going to shift just a little bit. The segue that I see here is what I just recited for you, 1,200-year-old teaching poem, is the type of thing that Zen chants, right? In Zen Buddhism, which is born in China, strictly speaking, about 500 BC, or I'm sorry, about 500 AD is when Zen is invented. So Buddha's been dead and gone for about 1,000 years by the time the thing called Zen invents itself, so to speak. Highly influenced by Chinese culture. Indian Buddhism, highly influenced by Chinese culture. It has a strong liturgical tradition, which a lot of people are surprised about. Like, I thought it was just meditation and hanging out and being groovy. Yeah, that's sort of true, but if your only exposure to Dharma or to Buddhism is like Jack Kerouac, and then you come to a Zen center, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea. Oh, it's so strict. Oh, and everybody's on time. Everybody sits up straight, and the liturgy is incredibly precise, and everything is ritualized. And you have to hold your hands this way and not this way, and it's this way and not this way, and everything. And you go, ah! right? That is the imprint of that culture at that time, right? So chanting, liturgy, incense offerings, bowing, prostrations, all the stuff that feels to a lot of us like religion, well, it is religion, duh, is really big in Zen Buddhism. It is a highly ritualized, highly symbol-oriented faith. And it takes us a while to kind of see it, but then you kind of go, oh, I get it. Everything you guys do is really, really oriented toward that. So the liturgy, the chanting that is done in the liturgy is something that goes all the way back. People were encouraged to chant even back in the time of the Buddha, 500 BC. But by the time it gets around to Zen, it's taking more of, it's kind of held like in the container of like a liturgy. It feels a little bit more like this is the practice of religion. But what hasn't changed, and what we're going to do tonight together, is chanting, and what we chant and the spirit of how we do it is really important. In Zen, the reason that you do it is way more important than the thing, right? So everything that is chanted in Zen is a teaching, always. It's never this is in praise of something other than me. Nope, we don't really do that. This is an ode of devotion to, no, there's some of that, but not much. What gets repeated and what we're encouraged to chant is a teaching. So you remember, so you remember, so you remember, right? So it's a little bit like when we were kids and we memorized, the 50 state capitals by putting it to a tune, and we figured out a way of memorizing the capitals, or we memorized the periodic table, or right? And the idea was, if you repeat it to yourself, if you chant it, if you engage the musical part of your brain, you're going to remember it. So that sounds really boring and practical, but that's actually where this stuff started, right? So what I'm trying to remind myself of is actually Buddhism, when it was first being practiced and taught, northern India, 500 BC, the vast majority of the people who were learning about this and practicing it were not going to be literate people, right? And they didn't have scrolls and paper and pencil to write stuff down, and God knows they didn't have word processing, computers and that kind of stuff. So how do you remember the teaching? Well, you have to memorize it. And then the person who memorizes it can teach it to somebody else who also memorizes it, And so nothing was actually written down, historians think, for like 500 years. So when we look at really, really early Buddhist scripture, one of the hallmarks is it has patterns and they're repeated, and it has patterns and they're repeated, and they have patterns and they're repeated, so we remember, right? By the time we get to Christian scripture, so much more is being written down so much sooner after it happens. I think Matthew's like, what, 50 years after the death of Christ, or 75 or something like that. There isn't the idea that it has to follow a pattern or rhyme or be chanted in order to remember it, because people have greater access. So I'm oversimplifying, but this is the origin of Buddhist chanting: is keep saying it and say it aloud and remember it so you don't forget. And like when you were a kid, what is being repeated is teaching. It's information. It is understood primarily to be factual, right? What it isn't is statements of belief. It isn't origin stories for the universe, destruction stories for the universe, conceptualization or speculation about what happens after we die, or any of that kind of stuff. Buddhism's sort of interesting as a religion in that way. Like, we don't spend nearly as much time on that stuff as other faiths tend to. What is repeated over and over and over is, this is the nature of reality as we understand it. This is the nature of reality as we understand it. I really want to have that so in my cells as a practitioner, right, that I'm reminded of it all of the time. And the thing that chanting does, above and beyond putting those facts in my noodle, like the state capitals, right, is if the voice that is expressing truth, if the voice that's expressing the importance of compassion, if the voice that's expressing how important wisdom actually is my voice, because it's coming out of my mouth, I have a different relationship to it than if I imagine that that teaching belongs to somebody else and I've just memorized it, or that teaching is owned or was taught by somebody else and I've just memorized it, right? There's something about saying over and over and over out of my own mouth, right? Then the Dharma, the teaching, we might say gospel in Christian traditions, starts to be something that isn't separate from me. It's now mine. It's now mine. And that kind of ownership, pardon all my air quotes, There's just so many places we could get, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down, right? But that kind of ownership is something that Buddhism puts first and foremost. They really are, all the schools of Buddhism would say, you've got to try this on for yourself, sweetie, to see if it actually proves to be true in your experience. Please do not ever believe anything because I said it, or because the Buddha said it, or because you think somebody special said it. Please don't do that. Please try it on for yourself and see. That feels to a lot of us in the West more like science, right? You know how we're supposed to be able to prove science? You're supposed to be able to, I am. That's much more the spirit we're talking about here. So chanting becomes something that evolves into a liturgical expression because we all want to have this stuff in our bones. Get it in your bones, get it in your bones, try it on, try it on. How is this showing up in your life? Is this proving to be true? What do you think, right? So that is interesting to me. I think that's really, really interesting to me. So tonight we're going to do 3 chants together. Of course, Jen and I went back and forth about this. We're aware we are not, in fact, in the same space together for a week on a long retreat. You can tell I really like that idea. I really want to be in a week-long retreat with you guys. But instead, we're connecting in this wonderful virtual space. And what that means is we can't harmonize. I can't hear your voices, but you can hear mine. And that's going to be okay. That is going to be a-okay. What is most important is that you hear you. So all of the Zen recitation and Zen chanting that I have ever done has been on one pitch. No melody, no fancy. Why? Because then it's easy to get to and anybody can do it. A 5-year-old can do it, an 85-year-old can do it. There's not a learning curve. You'll figure this stuff out just like this. And that also decreases our tendency to then want to create an aesthetic and then judge the aesthetic. And I don't know about you folks, but I went to Mass a lot when I was a kid as a Catholic, and most of the songs were spent trying to get the song right and have my performance be good so that I didn't make my neighbor cranky, or judging my neighbor for thinking, you think that's a B flat? That's not even close to a B flat. What are you thinking? Please just read. What are you thinking, right? So again, in its endless relationship with practicality, Zen's like, why don't we just choose one note? And why don't we all just stay on that one note? Won't that be nice, right? It's a very different aesthetic. I actually think it's equally beautiful, but it's just a very different aesthetic. So the first thing we are going to do tonight, and with your kind permission, Jennifer, if you could make me the host, I will do some screen sharing magic. And we are going to, ta-da! We are going to recite together. Here we go. What is called, whoops, no, not that one yet. This one. Are you all looking at something that says Metta Sutra? Sweet. Some of you know metta. Metta is a Sanskrit word that means loving kindness. And this is a very central, ancient Buddhist scripture. This is said to be the words of the Buddha himself. And so what we're going to do with our voice is we are going to chant this in a very straightforward kind of speech-like pattern. So the distinction that we are making this evening, I know some of you probably know way more about music than I do, but I know that if I was hooked up right now to one of those oscilloscopes that showed you my voice pattern, the little wavy, little squiggly things that voices do, mine would be like, right? But as soon as I started to do this, all of a sudden it would start to make waves, right? So chanting is actually singing. I am speaking right now, and now I am chanting. I don't need a melody, but it's the thing that I do with my voice to turn speaking into singing. And so that's how this is recited. I would recite this as, this is what should be done by those who are skilled in goodness and who know the path of peace. My word spacing is the same as if I was talking, but I'm just changing what I'm doing with my voice. This allows it to become chanting, right? So we'll do that together, and let's all just read this together. You can just follow along with me. You'll all be the one voice you hear, but please know, even though we can't hear each other, we're chanting together. We are chanting together. And also notice as you're doing this, and I think that's our only goal tonight, pay attention to how this stuff makes you feel, right? I know your brain can't, there's way too much going on for us to try to remember this and memorize it and facts and dates and stuff. The focus of our awareness when we are chanting is on the heart. How does it make me feel? I've got a lifetime to understand the teachings, but the heart is going to tell me what's important, right? So anything that you notice about your felt response, your emotional response to anything we do, that's what we're wanting to pay attention to, right? So as we're chanting this, Bear in mind, this is chanted every day by literally millions of people all over the world. Buddhist, Christian, non-Buddhist, atheist, doesn't matter. This is the Metta Sutra. The love scripture is what that basically means. It's about 2,500 years old, at least. It is ancient. And my sense is that this isn't Buddhist so much as it's human, and it represents a very deeply shared aspiration that I believe is actually universal. So notice how it feels tonight as we're chanting this together, to let those words come out of your mouth with your air from your lungs for maybe the first time, right? Let's just notice how this feels together. This is the Metta Sutra, or love scripture, and you can just join with me. This is what should be done by those who are skilled in goodness and who know the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. So take just a second to notice whatever you notice in yourself, whatever that happens to be. My hope is that you get a sense of a couple of different things here. First is the simplicity, right? You are already an expert at the thing you didn't know how to do 5 minutes ago. That is very intentionally how simple the practice is designed to be. Right away you get it. So then that whole part of yourself doesn't have to worry, judging, criticizing, comparing, right? You don't have to worry about it. You know how to do this. You also know, some part of you probably recognizes those words, even if you've never chanted them before. Some part of you probably goes, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's a universal felt spiritual aspiration. You'll notice the word Buddha, the word Buddhism, faith, us, chosen, never, no. This is said to be all of us, right? That is by design built into Buddhism from the very, very, very beginning, is we're here to address humanity. Some people have said it's the first world religion because it was designed to not be culture specific, people specific, gender specific, teacher specific. No, we're addressing all of humanity. This is how suffering is created, and this is how it is alleviated, and that means it works for everybody. Race, gender, creed, sexual orientation, even religion. This should work in theory, if it's universal, for everyone. So there's something very intentional about that, right? If that had anything for you, any juice, do it again, chant it again, chant it again. It's on my website, you can download it. It's easy to find copies of the Metta Sutra. There's a million of them. Notice what happens to your heart when you do that. Use your imagination right now to imagine if I chanted that every day. It took me about 3 minutes to do that. If I did that every single day, what would that do to my mind? What effect might that have in my heart if I did that every single day? Right? So that's the admonition. Please chant this every day. Please chant this every day. Please remind yourself, right? Just like we have daily prayer. Okay. I know I'm moving fast here, but that's how this is. Okay. Now I'm going to do a screen share with something. Woo-hoo-hoo. Oh, baby. This one's a little more challenging. Oh, there I did meta again. Here we go. Now, I hope you can all see something that says Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom. Is that accurate? Am I doing it? Okay, good. This is about 1,000 years older than that first one. This is literally the heart of Zen. This is the most chanted scripture in all of Zen Buddhism. This is chanted usually 3 times a day at every Zen center, every Zen temple, every monastery that exists on the planet that we call Earth. This is said to be the perfect expression of the entire Buddhist path and the realization that compassion and wisdom are inseparable as soon as you realize that we are all one thing. There is a separate Busshō and a separate Rachel and a separate Jen. And what's also true is no, not at all separate. And that both are true. And that both are true. And that our non-separateness shows up as separate Jen and separate Busshō and separate Rachel, but we're really not separate. And they're both held, right? So this particular scripture, we're going to chant it in the English translation, is famously difficult. It is famously brain confounding. So again, for this evening's purposes, please don't try to wrap your noodle around this thing. I've been trying to wrap my noodle around this thing for about 30 years. I'm starting to get a little bit of it, but oh baby, it's a pretzel. That's not the point. The point is to notice what happens to our hearts when we chant these words that are, again, so ancient and are seen to be, here's a perfect expression of the potential of human consciousness. When we realize we're not separate, compassion and wisdom arise. They immediately arise and they start to change stuff. And we trust that. So our 2 main characters, just to answer a couple of questions about the curiosity that will arise. Our first main character, you can see in that very first line, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. You will not be tested on that pronunciation or spelling because woohoo, that is the god or goddess, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Kuan Yin, some of you know the name Kuan Yin, kind of like Tara, if you know that kind of thing. This is an archetype of compassion, sometimes feminine, sometimes masculine, not the point. This is the complete embodiment of compassion, and she addresses Shariputra. Shariputra is our other main character, and Shariputra is symbolic of meditation wisdom. And so this is compassion coming to wisdom and saying, I need you to see that the opposites are not opposite and that they are expressions of one another, and then everything wakes up. So we're going to chant this. The difference here is this time, even though we're going to stay on the same pitch throughout the entire thing, just like before, this time the syllables are accented so that we start to chant like this. It helps us all stay together at the same time. The reason is because in the original kind of Sino-Japanese, it's a heavily syllabized language, but when we translated it to English, we decided to keep it. So I'm going to keep time on my lovely little wooden drum, and that'll help us all stay together. So we are all going to chant this together. Just do your best to stay with me. Again, disengage your noodle, open your heart, and wonder what it feels like for you. Pay attention to what it feels like to you to express this, and we'll see how this goes, okay? A little different than the first one, but about the same length. We got about 1 page here. I'll adjust our screen here as we go. I also will announce the sutra, and I will also dedicate it at the end because that is my job as a priest, and the rest we will do together. Heart of Great Perfect Wisdom Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when deeply practicing prajna, clearly saw that all 5 aggregates are empty and thus relieved all suffering. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is Emptiness itself forms sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked by emptiness. They neither arise nor cease, are neither nor pure, neither increase nor decrease. Therefore, given emptiness, there is no form, no sensation, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no sight, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of sight, no realm of mind consciousness. There is neither ignorance nor extinction, ignorance, neither old age and death, nor extinction of old age and death, no suffering, no cause, no cessation, no path, no knowledge, and no attainment. Thing to attain a bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, and thus the mind is without hindrance. Without hindrance, there is no fear. Far all inverted views, one realizes nirvana. All Buddhas of past, present, and future rely on prajna paramita and thereby attain complete, perfect enlightenment. Therefore, know the prajna paramita as the great miraculous mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the incomparable, which removes all suffering and is true, not false. Therefore, we proclaim the prajna paramita mantra, the mantra that says gate, 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 parasam, gate, bodhisvaha. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Okay, so based on the amount of time we have remaining, we are going to forego the Dharani. It doesn't matter. What you have just done, we had to do it together. We couldn't break off to do this. We had to do all this together, right? What we have just done is we have just chanted arguably the two most important Buddhist scriptures that exist on the planet. It'd be fun to argue with me about that. Even I could argue with me about that. But it is probably fair to say, without a doubt, these are at the very, very, very top of the pile. They both actually express the very same thing. They say it in very different language. The way that they are chanted is different. You can feel the addition of the syllabic emphasis changes, right? The way it feels, it kind of feels like a heartbeat, because it's the Heart Sutra. We got a heart thing going on. But for the remainder of our time together, what I'm really interested in hearing from you is how that felt for you, what you noticed. If you have questions or something, I'm happy to entertain them, but I know at some point I got to turn the reins of this runaway train, right? Back to Jen. I want to make sure we end on time and honor our schedule. But how was that? What did you notice? What did you maybe discover about yourself, and anything that I can do to help